Peaks of Yore is a first-person, physics-based climbing game that puts you in the role of a mountaineer during the late 1800s. You start off climbing relatively small peaks and structures before moving on to bigger challenges. Much bigger challenges. The late-game mountains offer an incredible sense of size and scale, with stakes so high that conquering them gives off an almost overwhelming feeling of satisfaction. And relief. But Peaks of Yore is as much about the journey as it is the finish line. Early on, you see a slow progression of difficulty with each new place you visit, which gives you plenty of time to hone your skills and learn about the game's various obstacles, before you hit that epic difficulty spike down the road. Along the way, you acquire useful gear and upgrades, spend time relaxing in your cabin, beat up seagulls, get beaten up by seagulls, hang out with other mountaineers, and chug ungodly amounts of coffee to give yourself an extra boost. There's also beautiful scenery and realistic ambience which create a calm atmosphere, so that the game has this striking juxtaposition of relaxing moments and moments of heart-pounding anxiety. Part of what makes all this so impressive is that it comes from a solo developer who spent years working on the project before the full version released last October, and he still adds regular updates, and there's even a DLC upcoming. Peaks of Yore's Steam page and its website describe it as a peak bagging adventure. Peak bagging is an activity where climbers attempt to reach a collection of summits that are published in some sort of list by people like this guy. And that's exactly what you do here. You get journals that show each of the game's levels, and when you make it to the top of a peak, there's a stamp waiting for you to prove that you finished it. Graphically, the biggest things to talk about are the two different visual modes you can use, the default mode and the colorful mode. Default mode has a stylized art direction that's inspired by old-fashioned photography, specifically that of early mountaineers. The lack of color, pixelation, and dithering mask the low fidelity you see in some areas very effectively, and it gives the game a kind of authentic, antique feel that draws more attention to its historical setting. It's not the only thing that does that. The climbing equipment you use, the outfits the NPCs wear, and the music playing in your cabin all tie into the old-fashioned vibe that the game is going for. Colorful mode obviously brightens things up and gives the environments a more realistic look. The difference between the two can be extremely noticeable in some areas and much less so in others, like near the tops of some peaks where everything is mostly gray and cloudy anyway. Even though I like the idea of the vintage art style, it's hard to ignore a setting that makes the game look overall a bit more cheerful and realistic, and I pretty much always preferred using colorful mode. You could also go for a hybrid look where you use colorful mode but keep on dithering and turn up the pixelation. It's nice to have some settings to toy with here. When it comes to the actual peaks, there's a solid variety of places to visit, and you definitely won't feel like you're just climbing extended versions of the same mountain over and over. You'll venture into a dark cavern where you need a lantern to see, try your best not to disappear down a deep crevice, Spider-Man your way up the side of a lighthouse, shimmy up a giant icicle, and climb through plenty of other places, many of which offer something unique, whether that's obstacles like tumbling rocks or whether it's weather, like freezing rain or high winds. This amount of variety is great, but other than the height of the mountain and obstacles that directly affect your climb, the visual style of the surrounding environments matters a whole lot less when you're focused intently on just reaching that next hold. Whew. There are some nice touches added here that help intensify and immerse you in the moment-to-moment gameplay. You can occasionally see and hear your heavy breathing, which highlights how exerting it must be to climb like this and how nerve-wracking it must be to hang so high off the ground. This wasn't totally necessary during some of the really difficult moments since I was already breathing like this in real life while trying not to fall, but it's a nice touch all the same. Eventually you can unlock a pipe which actually increases your climbing ability, so to hell with oxygen I guess. But hey, by 19th century logic, that's pretty fitting. There are more subtle sounds and visual cues too, like the dust and faint crumbling noise when you grab a new hold, the way your arm starts to shake when you're losing your grip, creaking branches, and rushing winds when you swing or make a jump, which all add a little something to help enhance the experience. There's no music while you're climbing, just calm nature ambience that doesn't compete for your attention, and helps counteract some of the stress during tougher climbs. Speaking of stress, there's one sound effect that always messed with me no matter how many times I heard it. Not far into the game, you get access to ropes, which are incredibly useful because they catch you if you fall and let you return to wherever you hammered them in. You have a limited amount, so there's a strategic element to using them, but I'll get into that a little more in a minute. They never break and they catch you every single time, but part of my brain never wanted to accept that because of this twanging noise you hear whenever you fall while roped up. Even after playing for dozens of hours, it still hits me with a jolt of anxiety every time I hear it, because it sounds like the rope is about to snap. My favorite aspect of the visual design is the sheer scale of some of the mountains. Looking down at your legs dangling over huge drops or pulling off difficult jumps at high altitudes can be thrilling, but also fear-inducing, especially if you're out of ropes or trying to save them for a different part of the mountain. Some areas have holds below you that you might be able to use to save yourself if you fall, but peaks with a lot of horizontal sections might not, and the terrifying view is a reminder that a mistake could mean starting all over from the beginning, so try not to panic. I don't know much about real-life climbing, but it's safe to say that Peaks of Yore takes a more gamey approach than a realistic one. The convenient holds placed around the peaks are enough to tell you that. That's totally fine, and it's good that the developer didn't let a quest for realism get in the way of letting the player have fun. It definitely allows for greater progression with your upgrades and skill level. Eventually, you can use jumps and boosts to fly up peaks at insane speeds, once you've started to master the game's physics and earned items that enhance your climbing ability. But before you get to all that, you need to learn the basics, or the fundamentals as they're called in the first Peak journal. You access your journals from your cabin, a kind of zen space that serves as the primary hub location, which you'll fill with items you find while climbing and rewards you collect as you progress through the game. The default controls are simple and intuitive. Left mouse button extends your left hand, right mouse button extends your right hand, space to jump, and WASD keys to swing in certain directions. There's also full controller support if you prefer that. It took me a little while to get the precision down so that I wasn't flailing around like a maniac before grabbing a hold, but that was just a minor hiccup, and before long I was able to climb around with enough confidence that I felt ready to take on tougher peaks. You might not move very gracefully at first, or ever if you're like me, but once you get the timing down and have a feel for the game's physics, it can start to really feel like second nature. Besides getting you acquainted with the controls and gradually increasing the length and difficulty, the fundamental peaks also highlight specific obstacles, most of which you'll see again on more advanced peaks. Some of the most common are shrubs that hide holds or other obstacles, brambles that block your hands, slippery holds and small holds where your grip fails if you stay on them for too long, and the most notorious one, the evil, murderous seagulls. These little monsters do not like being disturbed. If you grab a hold that they're sitting on, they'll fly around and try to peck your hands, which can send you falling to your death. Thankfully, you're not left completely at their mercy though. You can fight back by slapping them with a free hand, which is hilarious every single time.
Give the bugger a few wallops, I see.
Or if you need a break from animal abuse, you can bribe them with birdseed or try to quickly move outside their radius. They can definitely mess you up if you're not careful, but getting attacked by one is usually too funny to be annoying. They'll even stop by your cabin sometimes just to taunt you. There are a couple special game modes you can unlock where angry seagulls chase you around throughout the entire game. Here, yeah, they can definitely drive you crazy, but that's kind of the point. During a normal playthrough though, the birds and most of the other obstacles become pretty manageable to deal with once you've seen them a few times. So the seagulls aren't great company, and Peaks of Yore definitely feels like a solitary experience most of the time, but you're not totally alone out there. The NPCs you run into while you're out climbing or that stop by your cabin are there to give you rewards, items, tips, and provide some comic relief. There are some light story elements, but not much that really qualifies as an actual plot. The dialogue is never extensive, but some of the humor is pretty decent.
I'd love to climb this peak, but I really don't see the point.
Well, sorta. For me, the fundamental peaks provided a nearly perfect balance of satisfying challenges while I got the hang of things without ever becoming frustrating. Even if I failed and had to start over, I usually didn't mind because as I got better, climbing became more and more addicting. And most of the peaks here aren't terribly long, so falling wasn't a huge setback. I expected the next set of peaks after the fundamentals to have longer and higher climbs, but I was surprised to find that it's just the opposite. The intermediate journal is for bouldering, which are very short peaks that usually have 1 or 2 sections that require a difficult maneuver a step above what you've had to deal with so far. Some of these felt really awkward at first and took a few tries for me to get it right, but encountering that here first instead of way up in the air during a long climb is way less daunting. Once again, the game lets you improve your skills without punishing you harshly for failing, but you can enhance the challenge a bit by trying to beat the time trials. You might have already noticed by now, but Peaks of Yore is a great game for speedrunning. I was feeling pretty good about my skills for a while, but I was instantly humbled after watching some speedrunners. It's definitely not a requirement to enjoy the game, but the physics, level design, and even an in-game timer are set up nicely for it if it's something you're into. The Advanced Journal is where the game starts to pull the rug out from under you. The climbs here are longer than everything you've done so far, so the peaks start to feel more like an endurance contest. However, there's one specific item you unlock that really helps out here. Crampons let you use your feet to vault off certain places and jump very high and very fast so that you can actually skip over some areas, which makes some of these longer climbs feel a lot more manageable. And it's really fun. It takes some practice, and I never truly mastered it because sometimes I'd overshoot where I was aiming for or accidentally grab a hold too soon. But even having a moderate skill level with them can be extremely helpful. The first advanced peak really wasn't that bad, but my first attempt at the second one was a different story. Besides being the longest climb I'd encountered so far, it also had a lot of obstacles and a crazy don't look down death jump where you have to leap between a couple of the big columns you're climbing. I was so nervous I used up all of my ropes before the end and had to go the last few meters free solo, while praying to the gods of climbing that I didn't mess up and have to start again from the beginning. Now that I've gotten a little bit better at the game, a peak like this isn't so terrifying, but the sweat stain on the palm of my mouse is a testament to how intense some of these climbs can be the first time you try them. Now's a good time to talk about the safety harness. Had I been using it for that climb, then I wouldn't have run out of ropes and would have had a much easier time, but since it hadn't really felt necessary up until that point, I'd kind of forgotten about it. When you're wearing it, you can pick up ropes you've already placed without unharnessing from the one you're currently using, so you're far less likely to run out and can usually stay roped up for an entire climb. During a normal playthrough, this won't have any effect on the end result. You still get your stamp at the end whether you used it or not, although it does affect some Steam achievements. The only real disadvantages to using it are that it can increase the duration of your climbs, and it feels a little tedious having to backtrack and pick up all the ropes. Also, if you do fall and have to start over, you won't be able to use your previously placed ropes as shortcuts to get back to where you were. But still, when you consider how it reduces your overall chances of face planting into the ground, it's definitely a nice option to have if you want to avoid some frustration. Other important gear like chalk, which prevents you from losing your grip, and coffee, which enhances your climbing ability for a few seconds, can help out a lot too, and make some of these harder peaks feel less intimidating. There are a couple minor spoilers ahead, so you can go here if you want to skip over them. Overall, the advanced peaks felt like a little bit of a mixed bag when it comes to difficulty. Some were tough and took quite a bit of endurance for that first climb, and some were more of a breeze thanks to cramp-on jumping. Regardless, finishing off that advanced journal felt extremely gratifying, especially when I thought about how far I'd progressed from the easy peaks at the beginning. I'd also filled my cabin with awards and helpful gear and got to watch the ending cutscene and credits roll. Well, that's it, right? I did it. I'm a peak bagging Wait, what? There's more? Yeah, there is. A lot more, actually. Once you're near the end of the advanced journal, you're given access to a new region where you can climb the Great Bulwark, an imposing mountain that at over 2,000 meters tall absolutely towers over everything you've climbed previously. And here, the game introduces a new mechanic, ice picks. Using them isn't drastically different from grabbing onto holds, and it didn't take long for me to start getting around with them without much difficulty. To my surprise, the Great Bulwark wasn't the overwhelming marathon that I thought it would be, thanks largely to its verticality. It's mainly a straight shot to the top, with plenty of places to catch yourself on the way down if you fall. This makes perfect sense when you learn the unsettling news that it's actually just supposed to be a preview for what comes next, which really is an overwhelming marathon that can totally break you. Completing the Great Bulwark unlocks a mountain called Solemn Tempest. At around 7,500 meters tall, it completely shames all the peaks before it, and essentially makes everything you've done previously seem like child's play in comparison. These cheerful climbers you see hanging out around its base and while you climb are a nice little reminder of the kind of monstrosity that you're up against. You can try to ascend the whole thing carefully with the safety harness, picking up each rope as you go, but the sheer amount of time it would take to do this could definitely wear you down. Rushing through some parts and actually covering some distance before you start playing it safe could help save your sanity, but of course that's easier said than done. At the base, you can grab a bivouac sack which lets you stop and take a break without losing your progress, but that's the only new olive branch the game extends you here. A brutal difficulty spike like this won't be for everyone, which is probably why you're given one of the endings to the game before you reach this point, so that it feels at least somewhat optional, which I think was a smart decision. But I also think that leaving you with an absolute beast of a mountain that takes hours to conquer is an awesome way to send you off, especially if you feel like you've mastered everything else and are looking for that ultimate challenge. And if even that isn't enough for you, there are also other more difficult game modes, like You Fall You Die, where you try to climb every peak without falling or you have to start all over. Or Free Solo, which also has permadeath, plus you're not allowed to use ropes and some other useful items. So it's pretty hard to run out of challenges, and if you're a completionist, you have some work cut out for you. Peaks of Yore caught me by surprise with how fun and satisfying it is. The way it reveals new challenges and lets you gradually improve during its early stages easily got me hooked to its addicting climbing mechanics. I definitely think that it's a game that deserves more attention, and it's obvious that the developer put a lot of care into it. From the aesthetic to the historical setting, the humor, level design, and the fact that it has content that appeals to both casual and more hardcore players. I'd put some of the tougher climbs up there as one of the more intense single-player experiences I've had, thanks to gut-wrenching moments like when you're grabbing for those last few holds on a tall peak that you've just been struggling through. But with the optional safety features you unlock, it's also a game you can sit back and enjoy chunks of it without stressing too hard. And finally, it's worth mentioning that it's not terribly expensive. You can get it for just $19 on Steam, so that's also a plus.